Imagine a moment in American history when the U.S. government quietly erased nearly half of its silver dollar legacy. This wasn't because of inflation or some failed policy. It was because whispers thousands of miles away threatened to collapse an entire empire. The year is 1918. World War I is dragging into its fourth brutal year. America finds itself facing a crisis, not on the battlefield, but in the vaults of its most crucial ally, Great Britain. Deep inside government facilities across the United States, workers are laboring beside roaring furnaces. They're refeeding in bag after bag of silver dollars coins that had been a part of daily life for decades. This wasn't some small routine melt. This was the planned destruction of hundreds of millions of coins, all under a single piece of legislation known as the Pittman Act. Most Americans at the time never even heard of it. And even today, many people don't realize the sheer scale of what happened. The U.S. government authorized up to 350 million silver dollars to be melted down. Ultimately, around 270 million were destroyed. This single event quietly wiped out nearly half of all Morgan silver dollars ever minted. But why? What could possibly justify such a massive sacrifice? The motive wasn't domestic. It was tied to a desperate financial war raging inside the British Empire, especially in India. Germany, unable to defeat Britain on the front lines, turned to economic sabotage. German agents began spreading rumors that Britain no longer held enough silver to back the paper currency, the silver certificates, that were used widely throughout colonial India. Those whispers had teeth. As mistrust spread like wildfire, people rushed to exchange their paper notes for physical silver. Colonial banks were pushed to the brink of a massive run. If confidence collapsed, Britain could have been forced out of the war, not by artillery, but by pure panic. The United States couldn't afford to let its ally fall. But it also couldn't just ship huge amounts of gold overseas without jeopardizing its own wartime stability. This is where Senator Key Pittman of Nevada enters the story. Representing the silver state, Pittman knew the silver markets inside and out. He realized that America's vaults held a hidden asset, massive stockpiles of silver dollars, sitting largely unused, far more than were needed for everyday commerce. His proposal was simple but ruthless. Melt those surplus silver dollars, convert them into bullion, and ship the silver to Britain. This way, the U.S. could support its ally without draining its own gold reserves. And there was a clever twist. The plan also guaranteed future demand for newly mined American silver by requiring that all melted coins eventually be replaced. This was a huge win for the powerful mining states. When the Pittman Act passed in April 1918, its dry, bureaucratic language completely disguised its true impact. It authorized the largest, most deliberate coin destruction in U.S. history. Soon, trains loaded with millions of Morgan dollars traveled under armed guard to melting facilities in Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. Imagine the scene: workers dumping literal mountains of coins into industrial furnaces, watching as decades of monetary heritage, art, and history turned into anonymous molten metal. The government kept meticulous track of the total weight of silver produced. But here's the crucial part for collectors today. They kept almost no record of which specific dates or mint marks were destroyed. A rare Carson City coin was treated exactly the same as a common Philadelphia issue. History, artistry, and rarity were all irrelevant next to the raw silver content needed to win a war overseas. This lack of detail created numismatic mysteries that still puzzle researchers. Some dates that were once common became surprisingly scarce, likely because most of their mintage happened to be stored in vaults that were targeted early in the melting operation. Others, including the now legendary Carson City dollars, survived largely intact. Why? Because they were buried in deep storage that the workers simply never reached. The American public stayed mostly in the dark. While citizens focused on rationing, buying Liberty bonds, and reading casualty reports from the front, their government was secretly trading huge chunks of the nation's silver dollar past for international stability, and the mission worked. The silver America sacrificed helped Britain shore up confidence in its currency, it reassured depositors in India, and it blunted Germany's financial warfare. The runs on silver certificates stopped, the British financial system held together, and the Allied war effort stayed afloat. But after the war, the consequences of the Pittman Act kept unfolding. In 1921, as required by the Act, the U.S. Mint began striking replacement silver dollars. They used freshly mined silver, purchased at a guaranteed price of $1 per ounce, well above the going market rate at the time. This essentially created a long-running federal subsidy for mining states like Nevada. These 1921 Morgan dollars look familiar, but they fill a very different role. They were minted to refill a hole created by deliberate destruction, not to meet any natural need for coins in circulation. At the same time, the Pittman Act had permanently rearranged the map of coin scarcity and value. Mintage years that should have been plentiful, based on original minting numbers, were suddenly hard to find. And others that logic suggested should be rare turned out to be relatively common. This confusion got even deeper in the 1960s. That's when the U.S. Treasury discovered millions of silver dollars, many from the Carson City Mint, sitting untouched in storage since the late 19th century. These coins had escaped both daily circulation and the melting pots of 1980, simply because they'd been stacked in the back of vaults that few people ever opened. Their survival shattered long-standing assumptions in the coin-collecting world. Coins that had commanded high prices because they seemed rare were now appearing by the bagful. The government ultimately released these coins to the public through the famous G.S. sales, reshaping American coin collecting and introducing a whole new generation to the allure of Morgan, and especially Carson City dollars. Yet the Pittman Act's influence reached far beyond the world of hobbies. It set a powerful precedent. A government could deliberately liquidate part of its own currency, not just for monetary policy but for strategic geopolitical aims. It showed that money could be treated as a raw resource in international crises. That same logic resurfaced in 1933 when the U.S. government recalled gold, outlawed most private ownership, and melted millions of beautiful gold coins into anonymous bars. It echoed again during World War II and the Cold War, as precious metals and reserves were quietly wielded as instruments in economic and diplomatic struggles. For ordinary Americans, the implications were sobering. The silver dollars they had trusted as a solid store of value turned out to be vulnerable to secret decisions made far above their heads. After 1918, more people began treating silver dollars not just as spending money, but as relics worth hoarding, and why not? They had seen, or later learned, that the government could make them vanish overnight. This shift in attitude contributed to later waves of hoarding, especially as rising silver prices and policy changes signaled that traditional coinage might not be around forever. Even now, every surviving Morgan silver dollar carries an invisible scar from that era. It exists, in part, because countless others were sacrificed in secret for reasons most citizens never voted on and never fully understood. The Pittman Act stands as a stark reminder to both American and British audiences that currency isn't just numbers and metal, it's trust made tangible. And when nations face existential threats, that trust can be melted down, shipped abroad, and repurposed, leaving future generations to piece together what was lost and what it truly cost to keep the system standing. Thanks for watching. If you found this piece of hidden history as fascinating as I do, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more stories you were never told. See you next time.